in a very serious way, you know, just kind of like demos and talk culture, right? And I think that something I recognize on this trip is that I think New York culture is kind of like, the point of it is to spread. But I think something really unique about SF culture is that it doesn't really leak in terms of like the people themselves. The products fucking shoot out and then, you know, it becomes what it is today. But the uniqueness of the people and the seriousness and the culture doesn't really escape. And so I think that you kind of have to fucking shoot the arrow from New York and land here and just kind of be gracious enough when people show up. And if only 5 people show up, that means something as well. Luckily, we have 30-something really beautiful people. We have ex-DJs. We have the boy, Freddy himself. I think this is going to be a really, at minimum, lovely talk about how we live with technology and how we design technology and going through stages of breakthrough products and what it means to break your own breakthrough in some ways. So without further ado, Freddy, Anzures.
You assembled quite a crew of people here.
Twitter is powerful. Elon ownership or not.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, obviously. I know Reggie through a mutual friend, this guy named Andrew McLuhan, who is like the grandson of someone I admire, Marshall McLuhan. And so if anybody says like, hey Freddie, you need to get hip to Hip City Reg, that's what kind of connected us. So
yeah.
Very, very cool reference there.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think that might be a really good spot to start, which is honestly just the medium is the message.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you, and you know what does McLuhan mean to you when you think about where we are with the technology we live with?
You know, I thought to bring an OG copy of this. You just alley-ooped.
Yeah, I mean that was smooth. So this was not rehearsed. I didn't write any questions down.
What the fuck? Really?
So I don't know. Like let's have a discussion about this.
Yeah.
The medium is the message. So that's like.
Is it message or massage?
So actually, that's a great question. So.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
Saucy.
It's a great question. So apparently, when that book was actually printed, there was an error in the printing of the book that changed it from message to massage. And actually, Marshall McLuhan, the author, was into that because he felt that that phrase also was relevant as well in the sense that he describes mediums. The medium as the message really means to me that there's an aspect of the tools we make and those tools shaping us after we shape our tools and thereafter our tools shape us. And that really connects to the kind of theme of this talk, where a lot of people I know are in the spirit of developing stuff here, whether it's like, you know, what we saw earlier, or it doesn't have to be a tech product. It could be writing a book or writing music or making an album. And I think that there's an aspect of really understanding what it is about the medium in which you're creating that really speaks to who you really want to speak to is really based on what you how you choose to say it, right? So I think as it relates to what you guys are doing here, there's this moment where a lot of the fragmentation of how mediums have been, like books, records, movies, they're all kind of synthesizing now, and I think there's a real opportunity to try to break these kind of silos of how we consider mediums. And what's really special about that book is that book, if you go through it, it doesn't actually feel like a book. There's like a non-linear quality about it. There's like images and text, and it's kind of intentionally designed to be something that is, you know, you pick it up and it's very provocative, and it's not necessarily something you read from start to finish. So super non-linear, very like OG zine vibe. Exactly. But like for academia, that was so crazy. Yeah. So I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Also, just as a note, like, I'm not big into formality, so if you have a thing that you're trying to, like, get a pulse on, just put your hand up and I will just let you cut in. Yeah, I mean...
What does Marshall McLuhan mean to you?
I mean, McLuhan to me, that's like granddad, you know? It's like, I think something I wrote semi-recently is just kind of, technologists don't necessarily have a good muscle or broad attitude around criticism. And I think this really shone through in Mark Andreessen's recent manifesto. I did
the
like a little
optimist one?
Yeah, the techno optimist one. I did a little, command F, and I would just like put in critic, and immediately their only view is like media criticism is the enemy. Is like the long and short of it, right? And I just think that, Bible verse, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. It's like we cannot get to real things without criticism. And I think that and I talked about this at the last Fireside chat, like there's a valid angst against media, because I think media knows it's on the losing side of like distribution and power, because it has to live in technological interface. And they lost a lot. And we keep seeing that, right? Like Vice closing, Pitchfork closing. Like all these media companies, sure, some of them were like ZERP, but not all of them, and it's not like those audiences were fake or that cultural impact was fake. But I think that, I think technologists have a real problem with just criticism. And I think Marshall McLuhan shows a certain hopefulness in what criticism means, and a certain, we don't have to resign ourselves to whatever vision is being top-down applied to us. Because I also think that technologists have gotten very ivory tower in their sense of, we will give you the Apple Vision Pro and we will cram it down your throat and you will say that it's great. And yeah, it's a certain separation that it's not ground floor, it's not streetwear, for what it's worth. And I think, yeah, there needs to be a new attunement. I think Marshall represents a new attunement in a lot of ways. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
we're just warming up.
Yeah, we're just warming up.
Get into a groove here.
I mean, this whole thing can kind of turn into like a Marshall McLuhan vibe sesh. But I do think, one thing that is really important is his criticism towards like, inevitability, right? Like anything we choose to kind of like ponder means that it's not inevitable. But I do think the way like maybe EAC structures itself is like, it's big on a sense of inevitability. And I wonder, with your current role and looking back at things that you've built and your relationship with using those things day in and day out, like, how do you view inevitability within like computing, right? Like, to me, your device is it's a judo move, right? It's like, yeah, I love this form factor of, a tablet, but I need to judo move it so that I can actually really enjoy using it, right? That's not an inevitable outcome of where that technology would have gone, I think, with the current suppliers of said device.
So you're asking me what my concept of inevitability is when it comes to anticipating what's to come? Or?
Yeah, and then your relationship like as a designer to that, right? Because I think once you get on a certain product roadmap, you're kind of just living by that. And thus, we all live by Apple's product roadmap to an extent.
I think it's important for the designer to represent the people as much as possible and to have a sensitivity to, what people are actually wanting without even knowing what they want. And a lot of that has to do with observing human behavior and really looking at how people relate to other people, how people relate to their environment, how people relate to things, and observing whether or not those relationships are good. I think a lot of what technology has done has provided a barrier between you and I, or you and my environment, or you and a thing, that I have a feeling there's a real need for alternatives to having that barrier. And when you're trying to figure out how to I guess, course correct what those relationships are. You have to come at it, I think, from a very humanist perspective. It's almost like you don't have to, it's not about really technology at all. It's almost like observing like what it is about people's relationships to each other that could be better or more enriching. And the technology just happens to kind of be there to support that, as opposed to the other way around, which, to your point about, you know, Cupertino, there's this aspect of, hey, we're going to give you this thing and you're going to be about this thing, and it's not necessarily about, I mean, there's literally, you're putting a barrier.
Yeah.
It's literally a barrier. I mean,
yeah.
It's like literally and physically a barrier. So, you know, there's a role for that. There are instances where that is fine. But, you know, we're here right now, and all I have is really this notebook, and we're just hanging out. I've just lit up some incense, and hopefully this kind of interaction will be a little bit different than, you know, me having to look up stuff on my phone and all that. So I think we just need to be open to natural connections. You know, and I think technology can do that so long as people involved understand that that's the goal.
Yeah, well, I think that goal is an interesting question, right? Because I think about essentially like the outputs of any system, right? And I think just because someone, we were just talking about this, but we were talking about like status as a service and that Eugene Way essay. And, you know, it's like if the output of so many of these systems is a metagame of status, right? That doesn't, the outflows are so specific and nuanced, it's not always felt. Whereas like an outflow, utilizing the exact same technology, right? Just fucking Twitter, Substack, and word of mouth. Yeah. This room happened, right? And that was because of an intentionality towards like a very specific output in which now, you know, all the technology that allowed us to arrive here is now put down and to the side because we've reached the desired output. And I mean, you and I had a really great drive around the city where we talked about sort of the reflective nature of like the phone versus like the outward nature of other devices.
Yeah.
And
setting me up.
I mean, you know, the prep work was the prep work. I felt like that needed to get distributed.
I really wanted to make time with Reggie when he came over here just to get a sense of like what he wanted to do out here. I mean, obviously, like he's coming from New York, and you know, you're coming from the outside, looking into like this Silicon Valley world that I don't know what you guys think about this stuff over here. I'm sure like you have, I'd love to hear like your opinions of it, as much as I have opinions of like New York from here too. But for us to hang out in real time, in real space, driving around the city and kind of just comparing notes on, you know, what do you think about this? Or I'm working on this, or I would love for you to challenge me on this, or share with me this. It's like, I think those kind of things are much easier to do when you're in reality with somebody than on a feed. Yeah. You know? And then there's also like this humanness in the fact that it's just you and I together and not broadcasting to everybody, that it just sounds so weird to like, to make that private kind of one-on-one thing aspirational,
right?
All of a sudden,
right?
You know, and I feel like,
but a lot of that happens.
Yeah,
a lot of that is like, yo, we outside. Right. There's fucking homies right here. Flick posts like, oh, you're with so and so. And it's just like, but did y'all talk?
Exactly. Yeah.
not to be really corny about it, but like, no, totally. I do think that is a felt nature of like, because the system never ends at the interface, right? Like, there's a persistent awareness of, like, even recording this talk of, like, I need to document this to show, like, that I actually did this thing that I said I was going to do, right? And there's a latent anxiety built into the perpetual nature of, like, the network, right? Because that never turns off. Yeah. Twitter's happening right now, and we're missing Mike Solana be upset about Gemini Pro, you know? And it's like, that, like, we have, what's the book? It's very imagined community, right? It's like we have this perception of what's going on in the boundary of what we associate with.
Yeah.
Like, we know what's going on in Kansas just on the pure fact that we have a conceptual understanding of like Americans and like Kansas, right? And we have these shared tools. And the same thing happens with more niches. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Next question. When I think of a designer, I think of somebody who feels, somebody who has intuition, somebody who's sensitive, receptive in their body, in their heart. When I think of somebody who reads Marshall McLuhan, I think of somebody who's like an intellectual, somebody who's interested in ideas, kind of a galaxy brain of philosophy. Somehow it seems like you're somebody who has both of these sides.
Thank you.
I wonder, amongst like the best designers, people you've worked with, and including yourself, did you find most of these people were totally feelers, totally intellectuals, or kind of like both? And if so, why? How could you even handle that polarity?
It's a great question. I think we're in an industry that rewards kind of the intellect more so than intuition. And there needs to be kind of a yin-yang of these things. You know, like when you're asking me about like designers that I admire, I actually look up to people that aren't actually considered designers. The first person I think of is Bruce Lee. Like Bruce Lee to me is like somebody who was like a fucking badass, but he had a philosophical side to him that had the ability to translate this kind of academic, esoteric, you know, left brain world into actual creative, you know, combat. And, you know, I look up to him in a lot of ways because he represents somebody that you're describing, somebody who is able to kind of respect both sides and not see them as mutually exclusive, and actually his goal is almost to try to synthesize these two things as a way to bring people together. I mean, I feel like this is an example of that right now. Like, you know, Reggie's doing Terminal in SF as a with the intention of bringing people together, and that's no different than bringing intellectuals and creative people together. That's no different than bringing marketing and product development together, or business and art and commerce together. And it's like those two things, like Andy Warhol is also another person that I admire when it comes to the intersection of art and commerce, where he didn't necessarily, his art was almost like, he calls it business art. You know, he calls it like, he actually wanted to develop a process that enabled him to create as much as he could and then to sell, and that was the art form of it.
Yeah. He talks about the last art form being really good at business.
Yeah.
Which is insane to see written on paper.
Yeah, and I think that's such an interesting thing, because you have a lot of people who are making stuff like yourself that, you know, have to run into this idea of being an entrepreneur or a business person, and, you know, that's fucking scary, because like it's not seen as like, oh, like I gotta find somebody who focuses on that, because it takes all this mind frame to do the creative part, you know. And so I think we're in a world where we shouldn't think that it's just one person that does everything anymore. We need to work together here. I mean, I'm here to meet y'all and like just figure out how we can fuck shit up for real. Like, you know, this whole like East Coast, West Coast bullshit that's happening, or tech, whatever. I don't even know. I don't even know like what that is.
The
like,
East Coast, West Coast gang
it's like
wars
rap, you know, like it's like rap in the '90s. Like it's like we should be past that. And then there's also, and then on top of that, there's also this like generational, like,
oh, for sure,
this generational conflict that's happening, that like I'm like, y'all's is old for real, and I'm older, but like I'm open to hearing new perspectives and like having a conversation where I want to learn. I'm not trying to say that I know everything. You know, I may have been fortunate to work on stuff that, you know, did whatever, but like I'm past that shit. I'm like, let's do some new shit for real.
How do you kill your previous successes?
You know, you never know when you create something. It's like a kid. You don't know how it's going to grow into what it is, you know? And I liken a lot of the things that I've been fortunate to be a part of. The moment you lose contact with the thing that you created, it's kind of out of your hands, and then if it doesn't go the way that you would have wanted it to go because you weren't involved, then you either like, all right, well, you do that, and I'm gonna do this now. You know, I think a lot of people in Silicon Valley, and I'm just generalizing, to get investment for a company based on your past, it's like Al Bundy sitting on the couch, like dreaming about his college years and like, you know, just like reminiscing on how good it was, you know? And that's, you know, that's not fly to me, you know? Like when I remember there was, what's an example of this? Like Stanley Kubrick, everybody asks him about 2001, but no one asks him about like his latest thing. You know, everybody gets caught up in like, oh, I got to talk to you about the thing that everybody knows, and I don't give a shit about what you're doing now. You know, and I feel like that for a creative person, the creative person has to like stand up for what they're doing now. And if you're not doing shit now that isn't like different than what you did, then you're just stagnating. Like you're just like repeating this like same thing, you know?
It's a memory trap.
Yeah, it's almost as if like it's, you know, it's, I think about architecture, and whenever you have a ring, a circle, you know, especially when it's all glass and it's trying to be transparent, but it's a circle, you're just running around in circles, bro. You straight run around in circles. And you're hitting glass too?
So you hate new Apple HQ as well?
You know, I feel like people have, everybody has their time and place where they came up, you know? And I was very fortunate to have been at a place where the right kind of people were kind of in the mix at that time. And it allowed me to kind of just be open to figuring things out with the team to figure shit out for everybody. We basically just made stuff that we wanted, you know, because the shit that we had was whack. So I don't know if that's the case now, especially when you create a category that becomes a thing, becomes a genre. You know, it's hard to, how can I put this in a way that's like respectful?
It doesn't have to be respectful.
Well,
it doesn't have to be respectful.
I feel like if there's anything that I could say about that is that when I was going down to Cupertino, it took about 35 minutes to drive down there from San Francisco. Over time, it became like an hour and a half. So, you know, that just goes to show like how many people started to flock down there based on stuff that I happen to be involved with the team. And it's almost like, yo, like the longer you're at a spot, don't you want it to be easier?
Right.
Right? Like that should tell you something, bro. Like if you're at a spot long and you contributed and it's hard, yo, that's not really fam at that point. So
I feel like you mentioned this interesting sort of counterbalance where earlier you were talking about how the role of a designer is to kind of anticipate these interpersonal needs or anticipate either based on your own experience or kind of like objective how people relate to one another, what might reduce certain frictions.
Sure.
But then you kind of touch on this point where you don't necessarily know where things are going to progress. So do you think there's this kind of like relationship between anticipating needs but then not actually being able to anticipate what people will do once they actually have that need filled?
That's a great question. You know, Charles Eames once said that he defined a designer as a great host. You know, which basically anticipates, like, you know, like Freddy's like this is a dope ass crib over here. Like, you know, I didn't expect this to be over here.
To be fair, you know, Sean found it.
Okay, thank you, Sean. Nice to meet you. Again, it's like kids. Like, you never know what you make and how it's going to evolve unless you're involved.
Do you think that's what some of the fear around tech's progression, like especially from people who are outside of tech, it's like kind of view this thing as like almost just like scary, something we can't control and can't anticipate?
No, that is deliberate campaigning towards that. Like, you can't be Sam Altman, go around and say AI is scary for 3 months, and then be like, why is everyone so afraid of AI? Bro, you're the closest to it, and you said it's scary, dog. And they threw you out. Exactly. What is in the basement? So it's like, so I think that is happening with AI, and crypto people did the exact same thing, right? What crypto people said is like, the entire financial system is going to collapse, and if you don't own this fucking compute mined currency that we made up with math, then you're actually going to be poor as hell, dog. And then they moved to Miami with Lambos, right? Like hubris, like just pure hubris. And then they're like, why doesn't anyone want to adopt this? Dog, you just threw your bitch in my face. Like, why would I want, like, I don't, it's, at the end of the day, I think there was per like the product marketing fusion, right? Like what Apple gave us, and we all kind of came up with like the iPod era colored background, like that sensation of movement and beauty and dance is what was the promise on the other side of that product, right? And you know, I think that it's really telling that people feel the most wary about any Apple product ever with the Vision Pro, because they basically just showed a stagnant person zoned out on a couch watching a movie as big as humanly possible. You know, like they had an opportunity, and we talked about this, they had an opportunity to make the second version of that iPod ad, where instead of 2D silhouette on color, right? It's this entire room, and it's the best 3D visualizer ever, and I'm moving about in my headset. Oh, wow. But instead, I'm zoned out, or like Sean watching Dune in the kitchen when I come downstairs in the morning, and it is uncomfortable, right? And so we have a generation post like this B2B SaaS era that went around saying technology was scary because they wanted to accrue power. Because everyone now understood that if you make it in technology, you are really fucking powerful.
But it's not the technology that's scary, it's the risk of what people might do with it, right? It's
no,
not like
they painted that perception.
Boundaries, and like humans are just trying to like use technology to push boundaries because it's easier to do that than to do it against another like living, breathing person. So
I think they pushed that perception though. Like I think you
I don't
can
disagree with you. I'm just like asking questions.
And it's not binary, right? Like both of these things exist, but I think a lot of it is that was the campaign they went on to raise $7 trillion. Yeah. Give Sam $7 trillion.
During your most productive years, could you paint a picture of what like a day in the life looked like what a week looked like? Were you sleeping in until 11, like lazily walking over to work, pulling 16-hour days, like taking 5 showers? Like, just what does a day look like? What does a week look like?
I actually don't want to work.
Boo all of you. Everyone go back to the office right now.
I want to live, and it just happens.
Are you saying future tense or past tense?
Just kind of like thinking about what feels good to me in terms of what I do now and what I have been doing. I feel like I don't want to work. I want to live, and it just happens to be work. you know. So it took a long time to get to that feeling, because when you're coming up and trying to like prove to everybody else that like you know what you're doing, and imposter syndrome, and you know, all of that, like when you're trying to exist in the kind of blurred boundaries between things, you don't have a lot of people that are models for you, you know. And I remember I used to work at Frog Design, which was the company that did Apple's 80s like industrial design. And when I moved to San Francisco in 1999, that's what basically brought me here, was working for that company. I actually have a degree in industrial design, but I didn't want to go into that because at the time there was a lot of discussion about landfills and just not wanting to like contribute to that. And so I was like, you know what, I studied this major, but I don't actually want to do it. And so that was a crossroads too, to realize like, yo, how am I going to flip this thing that I spent all this time doing into something else?
Yeah.
You know? And so I think that is a skill too, is to flip your shit into something else, you know, to try to figure out like, okay, it actually doesn't matter like what you call something. Like you could translate that into something else, so long as people know that you're thinking and feeling about it in a way that can resonate into and materialize into something. So going back to the Frog Design thing, I remember I joined that company as a digital media designer with the intention of doing what was called convergent projects, where there were projects that involved a screen, a physical component, like basically mixing everything, you know? I didn't want to be siloed into like, yo, you're just going to do the physical part or just the software part or the logo or whatever. Like I was about like, how can I be a part of like a more holistic kind of idea of something? And so I remember like, it was the .com era in San Francisco. There was a lot of like money flowing around. There was a lot of parties. People were like IPOing everywhere. And I remember
I miss the 90s, man.
Yeah, there was a bust when all of that happened, and a lot of people got laid off. But I didn't get laid off because I was kind of a Swiss Army knife kind of character, where like, you know what, like, well, you need to keep him because he's not just siloed in a particular thing. And I feel like that was like 20 years ago, you know? And I feel like now that I see y'all like coming up, there's more of a sense of wanting to synthesize and not fragmentize like these siloed mediums. It goes back to the Marshall McLuhan thing. I'm like really curious how schools are trying to deal with this too, because you have majors that are like so like run by people who, you know, want to like own their land and like don't want to talk to anybody else. And it's like, yo, the dopest shit is when everything's mixed up. That's why hip hop's fresh, you know? It's like when everything's like a amalgamation of stuff, where it's not actually like the definition of something is actually based on how dope the mixture is, as opposed to like a singular ingredient, you know? I don't know if that answers your question, but I want to live and not work, if that makes any sense. Or put it this way, when you think about live, work, lofts, it's like a combination, yin yang, live and work. It's the same.
I'll ask it a different way. Like the day you first came up with Slide to Unlock, like what did that day look like?
Oh wow, damn. Can somebody actually, in my bag, in that North Face bag right there, there is a combination lock in that? Yeah, in the pocket, in like the bottom pocket.
It's not that one.
I thought to bring this as like a. I had a feeling this story.
I mean, yeah, unavoidable.
You paid me to ask you.
Yeah. No, it's just alley-oops over here. We were on the court.
I was gonna make everyone chant Steve Jobs is dead to like kill any Apple stories, but I thought it might be a little too much.
You say front pocket?
Yeah, the front pocket. There should be like a
what?
combination lock. Is it in there? hope
Yeah.
I hope I brought it.
Yeah, they're just going.
Someone else. You hand that over. Or
You can do it. You can do it.
Just
I believe in you.
Just actually pass it around. Pass it around. Pass it around.
Do it.
No, I don't. Just pass it around.
I got you.
Just pass it around. Just
You
pass
gotta
it
take
around.
risks.
Or actually, I'll
Yeah, why don't you get it first and then we can
Yeah,
pass it
yeah,
on.
yeah. We'll pass it around. Yeah. All right.
Oh,
So
we almost killed him. No more terminal SF.
it's funny. Like I feel like the best moments in life and work are times when you can synthesize like your upbringing, what you've done before, and like live on all cylinders, you know, and kind of like celebrate like all these moments that you've had the fortunate, you've had the good fortune of being a part of. And so I remember like when we were working on the phone, the shit was a touchscreen. Like we all know that it's like that's a familiar thing now, but at the time to have a touchscreen in your pocket was kind of like, yo, that's gonna go off. You know, that's gonna straight go off, and you're gonna call whoever. And so being sensitive to the repercussions of that form factor and that decision to come up with a touchscreen phone that essentially got rid of the physical button so that it could be whatever interface it needed to be, that also opened up the possibility of it just being able to, you know, accidentally go off if there wasn't something that you did or some mechanism that you did or something that you did to discourage that from happening. And so, you know, when we were given that project, I would raise my hands like, yo, I want to sell that shit. Because I always call people accidentally with my phone. And it was so embarrassing. It's like, yo, sorry, dude, I didn't mean to do that. So I remember, you may know this story because it's kind of a story that I tell a lot. It actually has a lot to do with being open to inspiration everywhere from the most disparate places. I was traveling from San Francisco to New York to visit my brother at the time, and I had a sketchbook just like this, and it was, you know, literally like I drew like, you know, this rectangle like this, and I'm like trying to figure this shit out, and I'm like, you know, is it like this? Is it like a lock like this? You know, is it like something like this? Because the iPod had a like thing, and like, okay, you want to kind of respect what people know, and Steve is really kind of keen on like taking you on that journey of every product is kind of like educating you, right? Like, yo, we're gonna come up with this iPod, we're gonna teach you that this is the thing, and then we're gonna remove the physical click wheel, and now it's a touch thing, and that basically sets you up for the phone, basically. You know, he alley-ooped into the phone for that. And so, you know, I drew that, and it's just like, yo, that like takes up mad real estate. And so I was drawing these things. I was in the airplane, and you know, I went to use the bathroom, and I saw the lock mechanism in the door of the bathroom.
Sit.
And I saw it.
Everyone loses everything. Yeah, I was gonna take a shit.
The best idea is in the shower.
Yeah.
When you're like, you know, you're kind of like, you know, I'm not even trying to. It's not thinking. You're just kind of observing and open to that inspiration. So I saw that, and I was like, yo, like, what if that piece was like, damn, like, what if that shit was like down here? I was like, oh, yo, like, that gives me all this shit to play with. You know? And so I literally like drew that, and when we were working on that as a team to realize that as a prototype, I'm like really big into sound and music. You know, if I wasn't a designer, I'd be into music. That's why the DJ shit's here. To reinforce this to feel like a lock, I thought to like, yo, I'm gonna sample my high school combination off of this shit. I'm going to take this piece and like bring this into here, and I'm going to record the sound that it made. So hopefully, that sound. So I recorded that sound, and then I recorded that sound, and that became the first sound that everybody heard when they unlocked this piece. And it's from this. So meaning to say, like, there are ways to like celebrate your life through your work. And you know, I feel like that was me like shouting out my high school, like, yo, I'm gonna sample my shit, you know? I'm gonna shout out like where I came from. And you know, that was just a prototype that we made, like a demo that we made. And you know, Steve Jobs is like connected with Pixar. They know like mad sound designers. Like, I'm not no sound designer, I'm just gonna do that. And that, he liked it, like it stayed. You know, it totally stayed for a long time. And I remember when we all had the phones before everybody had it, like after the keynote. And I remember I was in New York. I was in New York in the winter after it had been, the keynote was in January. And we were able to kind of take it around now that people knew what it was. And I went to New York, it was hella cold. And it was super cold during that time. And I remember that to be like one of the few people that had this thing before everybody else had it was like a really special moment. I talk a lot about like Imran Chaudhry, my close friend who I worked with on this stuff. There's a very strong memory of us walking. He and I live very close together, or close, not far apart in the neighborhood. And the day that the keynote was happening at Moscone Center down here, I walked down from my place in Hayes Valley by Alamo Square down to his place where he was at. He was in Hayes Valley, actually not too far from here. And we both walked to Moscone Center where the keynote was gonna happen. And I remember him telling me like, yo, it's gonna change after this shit. It's gonna change. And he was like, remember this feeling. Yeah. And we walked in that shit, and it was just like, when the presentation was happening, and we were all in the audience, and it fucking worked, dude. And like Steve Jobs like did the slides from like, and fucking everybody's like, oh damn, oh shit, that airplane ride, like, yo, it's on blast right now, you know?
Yeah.
And I was in the audience, and it's just like, damn, like, did some shit. And then after, like, there was just this stunned moment, like, even people within Apple at the time were just, like, so speechless. Because they hadn't seen anything, like that before. And kind of going back to, there was a moment, actually, at Infinite Loop where we were working on this thing for like 2.5 years or like 3 years, like not saying shit about what we were doing. And then I had to do like other shit. I had DJ'd and was art directing this music magazine just to have shit to talk about. Because I couldn't talk about this thing. You know? I have to lead a double life in order to socialize.
Real.
Because I couldn't like talk about this CIA type shit I was on. You know? And that, you know, that, like, just as a point, that resulted in me art directing this magazine called Wax Poetics, which is about records and music and shit. That's a whole nother tangent, but I feel like there was a moment where we were working on the phone and an engineer came into our space and they had it. Like, they had all the software that the team had worked on and had it in this physical thing that was untethered and like, there's like, yo, it's here. And it was literally like, they handed it to me like they handed it to me like this, and I was just like, yo, I can't even
look at that.
I can't even touch that. Like just the weight of all the sacrifice that went into that thing. I couldn't even like hold that shit for real.
Yeah, let's actually close the Apple loop a bit.
Yeah,
I'm curious about one thing, and that's like, you know, something gets mythologized like making the iPhone.
Yeah.
But there is still that time before the presentation where you're living in just pure, one, silence, and two, uncertainty. Because it's not like it's day fucking 30 and you're like, yeah, this shit's gonna slap when it launches. Nothing's like that.
No, we weren't thinking about that at all.
And so when you're living in uncertainty for three years, you know, year 1.5, it's not clear that I'm halfway through, right? There's no, it doesn't feel like that. So I'm curious about like living in uncertainty through the design process.
Yeah.
Conviction in the design process, conviction in the prototyping process, not just, you know, quitting off well, you probably couldn't quit because Steve would have just NDA'd your ass until tomorrow.
Well, like a lot of what we wanted the phone to do was not capable with the actual technologies that were available at the time, in terms of speed, in terms of like the kind of choreography of how we wanted the interface to like behave. Like the shit was mad slow, and it took a lot of battery and shit. And so we had to persevere through our perceptions of what we wanted it to be, given what was available at the time. And that patience of like waiting for certain like chipsets to fucking be available, or like, yo, that we could use that thing and to make this thing happen. Like, you had to be mad patient. You had to want this thing to be that. So you had to believe in it.
And where does that alignment to even know what you're believing in comes from, right? Because everyone's working with their own memory set, with their own perceptions of what they think the product should be, with their own tasks, whether it's the keyboard, whether it's, you know, the edges, the ID.
Well, I don't think anybody at Apple would want to work for a company doing a phone other than Apple at that time.
So it's the memory of what Apple is and what it means to bring a new product in for Apple then.
Yeah. Well, like to be in that lineage of what Apple stood for, I think was an aspect of wanting to be a part of it. You know, like I think with you were talking earlier about, or we were talking about anticipating like what's to come, and whenever people ask me about like Steve Jobs and stuff, I think there's an aspect of he in the 70s knew that like these mainframe computers were going to be in your pocket.
Right.
You know, he just had that like crazy thought. So, you know, for somebody to be on that for so long and then like work towards that versus somebody who may not have had that kind of vision, you want to ride with that person no matter how they are, kind of thing. It's almost like a lot of people say, oh, what was it like what was he like and stuff. And
while listening to that, and I was like, like that's like God making music. It's kind of interesting. And then when you like think about it, it's like the four seasons. The four seasons are like a part of like the way you think about the four seasons are a part of the creation of the universe. I was like, kind of vibes.
Yeah. What music should we be listening to while we make AGI? If you had to pick one. What's like the AGI album?
Endo.
Wow. Okay, what do you think is the first album that AGI chooses to listen to? That might be another. What would you make it listen to? It's like giving the aliens like an album. Maybe you give them Outcast.
I would make it listen to Amapiano.
Wow.
Because like Amapiano is like
Does everyone know what Amapiano is?
No.
No.
You should play.
Alright.
So
Keep going.
it's a genre of music that became popular in South Africa. It was created in South Africa. I'm not exactly sure what year, but it's probably like 2013 or 14 or something like that. And it's basically what it reminds me of is like dance hall rhythms and stuff like that. Because like, you know, most of the time you're like, yo, everything sounds the same, but it doesn't really sound the same.
Yeah.
And there's no distinguishable artists because it's all like these producers who are making it, and they're sharing these tracks through WhatsApp, and like a DJ decides to take that track and popularize it because they play it at a party, and a dance gets made. And so it's like Amapiano is more than one artist or a song. It's literally the party, it's the DJ, it's the dancers, it's the way in which the music is traveling. It's like it kind of has the similar pillars of like hip hop. But that's killer. Like when have you seen a scene that it's literally culture? So it's like, oh, like AI, listen to culture.
Right. Right. No, it definitely is culture right now. I mean, I think Yatu and I definitely like noticed this over the summer in Paris Fashion Week. Like that was all they were playing. That was it. Everywhere. But my gripe with it is I think it's the easiest thing to mix. Like I think like if
right though.
No, it's less of like a problem as much as it is. It's a feature. It's not a bug.
Yes.
You know, but I do think there's something to like things that are hard to mix and the effect that has in the room, because it's so like, oh, homie is doing something.
Yeah.
I think that's really important in like this time of like DJing, where like I think the quick critique is like, homie's not doing anything. You know, I think Amapiano is so smooth with its own genre that's just like, how long have we been on this track?
That's also if you're playing the hits. I think
that's
like,
true.
Like I was one of the sort of like, I guess, pioneers or people who have made it popular is this guy named DJ Maparisa. He's from South Africa. And the other day he posted a video and he was like, he was talking, it was a message to Nigerian producers and DJs, because Nigeria has kind of like taken Amapiano and made it its own. So it's like Naija Piano right now, which is like, it's kind of more popular than like the South African Amapiano. And but basically he was like, hey, please stop playing our music at 120 BPM. It's too fast. You're playing it too fast. That's not how it's supposed to be played. And so it's like there's a cultural nuance to doing Amapiano. Right, so it's like there is like, if you were in South Africa, you might not be able to DJ that easily.
Right.
Like there's certain things that you would have to understand and know, which I think is like goes back to like AI. Like, yeah, you should listen to this Amapiano to understand, because the listening wouldn't take place just in the music. It would be like watching the videos.
Right.
It would be like learning the slang, because there's this like.
What's that world model that we
Yes.
kind of get back to, like with what was that model that was just released, Sora, right?
Yes.
Where people are like, well, is it constructing a video or is it really understanding like the physics underneath, right? Like, does it have a true sense of the world? And you know, Amapiano kind of has like, there's a real world there. And I remember the first Amapiano show I went to in Brooklyn. I swear it must have been every South African in Brooklyn within this one like spot, because it was us and then it was Luca, who you've met, and basically there was like one other guy that looked like Norm, and I was like, okay, this is a whole culture I was not like tapping into.
Yeah, no, it's pretty sick.
The reason not to cut you off, the reason I love kind of like DJ metaphors, just to really bring this into like the topic, which is AI and creativity, is because, you know, DJing is about reference point, right? It's like, I have a reference on this side, I have a reference on this side, and I have some hardware right in the middle that allows me to create effect, to create a moment, to blend these things. And there's a lot of early image generation models were actually about essentially put image on this side, put image on this side, play with the weights of kind of like, I want the composition of this and the styling of that. I want, you know, these colors, but these forms. You know, I kind of prompted you with this question when we were like thinking about the Fireside chat, but you know, just to really kick this off is like, where does like the artist start and stop, and where does the tool take over? Is there a difference, right? Like,
I don't think that there is. We recently trained an AI on me. We in the last year we've been doing this with Grimes. We have this chatbot Grimes AI. It exists on Twitter. It's it's like some people, even you, thought it was her.
Yeah.
Even though we haven't.
It got me. It got my ass.
But we've never also said this is like a fake Grimes. We've never also said this is supposed to stand in for Grimes. It's literally supposed to be like Grimes has created a new being, right? And so recently we were like, well, in terms of the platform that we're building, we have to make that scalable. Like it can't just be like only Grimes can do something like this. How, what does it mean for another art, for anyone to be able to create their own artistic intelligence? And so I have this chatbot, and it does like 5 tweets for me. Like every, I have to hit refresh in terms of the way this is functioning for me right now, but every time I refresh, there's 5 different tweets. And 1 or 2 out of every 5 are like good. That's how my brain works, right? Like that's how my brain works. Like you have all these things in your mind, and you're constantly going like no, yes, no, yes, no, yes, and you're probably saying no to a lot of things that don't get said. And so like that's an extension of me. That AI, like that now, it's just more like I can see it now. Like technically you don't see these ideas. Or some people see their ideas more concretely than others. But a lot of times you don't see them, and you don't have really that ability to make those choices. And so I don't think that there's like a start and stop once we have the interfaces for AI, right? Like that's we're in this stage where there's not a lot of great interfaces for interacting with yourself. Because I mean that's what we think it should be. It should be a version. Maybe not all AI is going to be that, but I think in the creator realm, it's a version of yourself. The first experiment we did with this was in 2019 with Grimes, and it was like we created a deepfake of her voice, and we trained this we trained a neural net on meditation literature, video game content, and social media content. And then it created these meditations. That's what we called them at the time. So it was Grimes doing a meditation about meditation. Then it was like Grimes talking about video, like talking as if she was a video game character.
Well, she was in, wasn't she in Cyberpunk?
She was in Cyberpunk 2077.
Yeah.
But this was just like her talking as if she was a video game character.
Copy.
And then the third meditation was basically her as someone on social media. And it outputted these meditations. We released them finally when we put out the model for people to use her voice. But during that period of time, it was an art experiment around because what ended up happening is she produced music under those meditations. So it was the first time she was producing a version of herself. Like typically she's in the studio producing herself, and it's very hard, right? Because like she has to record her own vocals, she has to, go in and comp these vocals. But what happens when now you have this AI generating her vocals with lyrics, and now all she has to do is produce it. That was she was like, oh, this is incredible. I get to create and collaborate with myself.
Right. Yeah. Well, it kind of comes back to this thing that I think most people, when the choice exists to create or to edit, most people are picking edit, right? Because there's whether it's the blank canvas problem, whether it's just a general insecurity, editing is significantly sort of a easier thing to grasp. It doesn't mean it's easy to do. It's physically easy to do, but it doesn't mean you're good, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's an interesting thing that happens with an artist like Grimes, who can kind of utilize all previous creations to take that present day load off of themselves and just go into edit mode.
But that's what previous to AI, that's what a lot of music making is. It's like you're sampling. That's why you said that DJ reference. It's like most producers are DJs or some version of a DJ where you're sampling from all this great culture and then being like, all right, how do I edit this down to something that is most advanced yet acceptable? Which is the Maya principle.
Yeah. What do you think happens to something you talked about, like artistic intelligence, and I think artists are very associated with newness, and I think what's interesting is like just the concept of like you can't train a model off of something that doesn't already exist, right? So it's inherently referential. What do you think happens to like the concept of newness and like just assisted creativity or assisted production? Was newness ever real? That's another just kind of like philosophical question.
Well, I'll say that we've been pleasantly surprised by like how it comes up with things that maybe she wouldn't have thought about. And so.
Is there a meditation on
that? Probably.
No pun intended, actually.
I mean, like every time that happens, like even earlier today, like I sent her something that my chatbot said, which was like it was something about like writing a book. Actually, I'll read it because I thought it was pretty funny. It says, every day I'm reminded that I need to write a book. I'll call it The Light from the Dark, a blueprint for creative liberation in the 21st century. It will explore how we can use technology as a conduit of love and empowerment instead of control and manipulation. And she was like, and I sent it to her, and I sent it because like we have talked before about like, I should write a book about like management and stuff like that. And so she goes, they're really getting good at being us. This is slightly concerning. And so, but the way she responded is like typically how when something happens like that, it's like like maybe we need to be concerned. And I don't necessarily think that. I don't think that that's the threat. Like, I think that the threat is what will humans do with this technology to another human, not how, like, what is the AI going to do to us? Like, we are going to evolve with it, and we are already evolving with technology in a way that we probably either never thought was going to happen or don't actually understand that is happening. But everyone in here has a phone attached to them right now.
Yeah.
Not one person got here without it.
Yeah, shoot.
So I feel like at the beginning you were talking about how the bot that Grimes made was not like, it's not her, it's not like, some emulation, it's like a different entity. And then you talk about like you kind of collaborating with it effectively as almost like a mirror of yourself. And so I wonder, like, does it feel more like when you're collaborating with it that you're collaborating with yourself, that you're collaborating with a different entity, or maybe some other third thing that, and fill in the blank?
I think it's probably like a new language to say what you just said, because I can't accurately talk about how she describes it, but I know what my experience is like. Like I have a voice model, I singing and text to speech, and I have a chat model, and I'm like, I feel like I can do things that I wasn't able to do before. And like I said, I don't think that the interface exists yet where it 100% feels like I'm interacting with myself. But what I do know is that like when I see those words, I'm like, some of those I'm like, damn, like, that's me.
We talk a lot about newness novelty as it comes from AI, but what I'm curious about is like, do you is there ever a fear that we could stunt our own growth, you know, by relying so much on AI? Like, I'm even noticing now how much I use GPT to edit content. That feels dangerous as we go down this path.
That's what I think the threat is. Like, I was speaking to a colleague of mine earlier, and I think that the threat is like how social media has damaged our brains in the way that it has. So, you know, I think it's hilarious right now that only white men right now are posting about Gemini, making like white people that are black, and I'm like, I think that's hilarious because like now.
Okay, so for those that don't know, let's walk that back a little. This talk is recorded. The current.
We can take it out of context, but I think it's important. Like I said it the way I said it because that's how it was in my brain.
Yeah. Okay, so for those that don't know, the recent Gemini like Pro model that was released by Google is, I would say, like comically woke. So
it's like hardcore DI.
Yeah, hardcore DEI. Like it basically, like if you ask it who the founding fathers are, it will be like 3 black men and an Indian woman. Like it is fucking insane, right? Now, maybe someone in that training office loves Hamilton. I am not putting it past them. I could see that. I could see them blaming it on that. But it's just it was just so comical that obviously white guys, you know,
but
we're
it's
not.
Only the reason why I'm pointing it out that way is because it's a reflection of like people going, oh my God, this is how education is going to work in the future.
Right.
Like it's going to wipe out people's history. And I said it the way I said it before because it's like hilarious because that's literally what's been happening for the last however long that media, like mass media. Sure. Cinema has existed. People of color have been like, yo, why are you casting these people that are supposed to look one way as someone else? And yeah. It is hilarious to see that happening on social media in that way. So that is the threat, right? The threat is that like we are seeing real time what do they call it? Like history is written by the victor, you know? That's what you're seeing that happen. You're being like, man, if he gets $7 trillion, if this person has this, what is history going to look like? So that's the biggest threat. It's like, how do humans deal with this power? It's not what does AI do, it's what do humans do with it.
Yes.
I don't have like a formulated question, but the thing is I think about mediation and like creation right now, or at least from my experience, we've been using mediation tools. And the other day I demoed the Vision Pro and I realized I literally was like crying inside of there because the experience was so speculative. And I kind of like moved away from mediation and I was like really in pure being, and that was like a really profound moment for me of like I almost saw the edge of where we've just come from, and I saw the beginning of like something kind of like a new frontier, but nothing that we're mediating. So I just see it as like, I don't even know how I could describe it except for very fluid. This is just how I'm like, and I don't even know if that's a question.
If I don't know how much time you spend like reading like New Age Enlightenment like thought, right? And it's like all those people like 100+ years ago, like in New York, they like some of them had these theories like Madame Blavatsky specifically that like. We are not like the human that exists today is still like a child, right? And she's not the only person that's had this, but she expressed it in this way, and that there will be this like graduated evolution that we just like we have to get to, and it's almost like when you say you're like I put the vision on, and I'm like, I feel like I'm there, and it's like, you're like, oh, that sounds similar. It's like, what if what has to happen is like we put on these goggles, and you start to merge, and you got the chip in, and all of a sudden, like, it is a brand new experience. I don't know, like there's like, it is weird to be like, that's not the way, when it's like, we've literally been doing this for like 100+ years right now with cars and computers and smart homes and like, we've literally been doing this.
Yeah.
But then we're gonna
fiction. Like, I mean, like reading Dune, like, I'm still with those characters. Murakami, I'm still in QT84. Like, those people still live inside of my being.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, so I think those mediation tools or devices, they somehow feel like they're embedded in us now. It's almost like they're no longer a mediation tool. Now they're actually like loaded in.
Right.
Like
well,
the Matrix.
Yeah. I mean, this goes just straight to, McLuhanisms, right? Which is just, the original, the medium, and the message is a misprint. It's the medium massages, right? It massages us over, and so whether it's the affordance that this chair allows for that position, the road as a delivery system, the headset, and that sensation of presence, right? All these things are about a sensorium effect on our body, right? And this is, now we're kind of like tripping into like hardware thought. But what we're seeing with things like tab, things like rewind, all of these things, right? It's trying to trade an eye for an ear, right? This is about the eye, right? I am forced to stare at this. iPhone. Thank you. Vision, right? It's in a full encapsulation of vision, and so of course, because it takes over our entire vision professionally, the device, other than its weight, right, which is a sensory side effect, the device itself disappears because you're legitimately in it, right? And I think some of the uncanniness and why we struggle with language with AI, this idea of like digital twinning, what have you, is because there's a sort of fully realized disembodiment of self that is not just a representation of what I've already produced, like my Twitter account is a representation of what I produced in text, but instead is mixed with something else, right? The black box that is AI, that can be eerily close to me. And I think that's why we're in a sort of language vacuum that we're looking for.
Yeah, I'd love to touch on that black box. So I had a close friend of mine tell me, his name is Aaron Z. Lewis. He loves
him under the bus.
No, putting them on. No, I'm sure this is gonna be a bar.
Yeah, media ecologist, really smart guy. Says that the ultimate form of augmentation is language. Right? Language is the ultimate form of augmentation. We're having conversations here, and we're using our words and all of our brains and mental frameworks of what we are trying to mutually understand in our own realities of what we're talking about is being constructed. And it's funny how we started, how computers started with the command line prompt, and then with a GUI interface, and now we're back at the command line. And if you want to take it back, we could talk about books and fiction, like mentioned. But you're talking about this black box of something that we're dynamically playing with. So this is not so much like a classroom question of like what's the right answer, but more so would love to hear thoughts around what I have seen, if I'm trying to pattern match, is that the simple already, the war has one answer way of not having a black box, but having the light. For some people, our religious contexts is like, let's say, for example, the Bible. In the Bible, when people are trying to refer to lessons in life, guidance, and what to do next, and reflection, they refer to the Word. And now with things like ChatGPT, that is, for me, seeming like for a lot of people, it's seeming like the new word. And so ChatGPT is inherently, not ChatGPT, but AI, which is ChatGPT is one of them, inherently augmenting the way we obstruct and view the world. And so where is if I had to pose a good question, it's like, where's the responsibility of this black box? Like, if I go to ChatGPT right now and I ask it a question of like, I was having a conversation with a friend, what's the difference between anarchy and libertarianism, say for example. Is what I get back the answer, or if I go to the Bible, will I find the answer? Like, it's and you know, there's the darkness and there's the light. So I feel personally lost, and I'm curious if there's any optimism or thoughts around how influential we're willing to acknowledge that language is when it comes to how it augments our understanding of the world and the reality we live in on a sensory level beyond just vision and our ears.
Well, I mean, Sherry Turkle says that we take things that interface truth, right? And I think that's like the most important quote as we think about generative anything, because while yes, we kind of have this like return to the prompt line, it's still being surfaced through the GUI. And so if we take things that interface truth, and I think to go back, like, why are white guys freaking out, is because they know we take things that interface truth, right? And so if, let's just say 100, let's just say like every kid at school, right, ask who the founding fathers are, I know it's all like black guys, of course, like they're going to simply take that at interface truth, right? And it's very hard to undo what that does once it hits our eyes, right? And this is also kind of like why the media, and I say media broadly, you know, Fox News, CNN, whatever the fuck, gets upset with like Twitter, and why government gets upset with Twitter. Because we take things that interface truth, there's no differentiation between my Twitter account and the CNN Twitter account, right? And so what I say is equally as valid. That's why Trump was so, you know, dope, you know, because it's just like, hey, show up in front of the Capitol. Hey, go inside, right? Like, we take things that interface truth. That's just a command. Like, they're just getting prompted and they go, right? And so, I think that responsibility, the obvious answer is like, all these companies have like a AI safety responsibility, sure, whatever. But like, I think we sort of, responsibility is kind of like downstream of whatever, like kind of like the interface mechanism already is. And we're going to take that effect into our senses, whether we want to or not. The only, like, to use like a San Francisco style thing is like, you gotta like tune in and drop out. You know, it's like, that's the only out is out. And I mean, that's why, you know, Ted Kaczynski's never mind.
I think that like the practical, maybe the solutions that I have, at least for like making sense of it, is thinking about like what the ancients did and do today. And it's like, so it's like whether it's the Bible or other cultural technologies, that's the best way to put it. Actually, there's like incredible blueprints for all of it, you know, for everything that's happening today, right? Like the original computer was in the sky. Cloud computing existed thousands of years ago because people were like, we're gonna store a bunch of information about agriculture in those stars. We're gonna store information about human personalities in those stars. We are going to store, what other things did they store in the cloud computing back then?
Navigation.
Navigation, right? So, like, this isn't new. So I think, like, there's this really amazing philosopher, his name is Raoul Nefram, and in this one book he talks about, he says, Every technology has a special language. All technologies have realized the need and value of having their own special language. Although every technology has a special language, technicians have failed to realize the need for the same in the area of human affairs. This, of course, must be qualified, as it is not true for ancient scientists who were well aware of its necessity and developed such languages for their use. Sanskrit, classic Greek, classic Latin, Kabbalistical Hebrew, astrology, I Ching, and many African languages extant today. Careful observation will show that most of the above-mentioned languages were used predominantly for religious purposes. This is not surprising, as religion properly comprehended will be seen to be a technology of living, the study of application of laws affecting the events in our lives. Hence the special languages, classic Latin, etc., which were always kept apart from their vulgar counterparts and the uninitiated. Until we had literacy. So, it's like this has all existed. It's just certain people have had access to it, and we're in the same boat right now, where it's like, can you raise the capital to go and build the system that people are going to use?
I think there's also something building on what Yatu was saying, which is that there's more than one religious text out there, and there's like more than one religion. So like, I think like thinking about AI as a monolith, as like a thing that, you know, has all of the answers and we should like subscribe to all of its answers, as like a monolithic single solution, is not actually how the AI economy will happen, right? Like, there's already all these like competing models, like the one Gemini I think you mentioned, that like is wildly different to ChatGPT.
or a Mixtral.
Yeah, or Bard or whatever, and like they all like respond differently. And maybe like the right way to think about it is, which of these gods do you subscribe to? Which of these religions do you? Which black box seems to resonate with you most? You know, like the idea that there's going to be an AI that is like universally consistent is almost definitely not true, right? Which kind of sucks.
It's like 100% not true,
It's
right?
definitely not true.
It's the polytheistic God.
Say that word again?
Like, you know, the Hinduism, there's many gods.
Right, yes, right, exactly. So I think that's kind of a mindfuck.
Or the attributes of God.
But like how do you, what I think is tricky is like, how do you assess each one of these offerings for like whether or not it is the one you want to worship at?
I think that's a good segue back into what you were talking about previously with like artistic intelligence. Like, what is the path of that artistic intelligence into whatever, you know, little group of black boxes that are going to be the assistants for artistic intelligence, while, you know, Sam and OpenAI are very clear about like going for like scientific breakthroughs, right? So I don't think, and you can, I don't know if anyone saw like the artist in residence that they chose, but that was like the most disgusting image I've ever seen in my life.
I didn't see those.
I saw it.
It was so bad.
What was it?
It's like a.
It wasn't worth like storing in my brain who the artist was. So,
It's like a pig claw into a swimming pool.
yeah.
It's disgusting.
Yeah. It was rough. But back to that question, right? Like maybe a helpful kind of like, what is like your human definition of artistic intelligence, and then how do you sort of like branch that into like the models that y'all are working on, the models that you respect, the models that you ignore. Yeah.
I'm just going to read from it. All humans are created. This is my artistic intelligence thesis.
Okay.
All humans are created. Biologically, it is encoded within our DNA to replicate, which is a creative act. When we think, we create. When we speak, we create. When we move our bodies, we create. We are creative beings. Being human is creative. Being creative is subjective, and most often than not, it is an unconscious act. Some humans decide to intentionally be creative, and that is when being creative turns into being artistic.
Bar.
Bar.
Act like you've been here before.
Our heart. This is now disconnected from that statement, but it still goes as our hardware and software is designed to create life. And so I think that like as that thesis intersects with like actual machine learning and NLP, and you know, large sound models, and things like that. I think it's about how we are like individually contributing to the model and like sort of like tending and caring for it. Like it's like it is sort of about creating yourself. Like there's this so on in the walls of the pyramids and the coffin text, the oldest recorded, you know, sort of recounting of like the creation of life is, it goes like, there's I'm paraphrasing, but it's like, Amun says, I create myself out of myself. I cause existence to exist so that I existed. And when I realized I existed, Ma'at was at my side. Ma'at being like the law, right? To give, you know, order to everything. I created Shu, then I created Tefnut. They created Geb and Nut. Then they created Oser, Oset, Nephthys, and Set. And after I created everything that I desired, I expanded in it. That's incredible. That's what you're doing with artistic intelligence. Like you're essentially creating yourself and your world, and then expanding in it to make things and experience things.
I think about that particularly in the sense of music, and you know, I think if you're my age or younger, right? I'm 28. You've had like unprecedented access to music, and which also means you have unprecedented like space for consuming music, because it's you can decide for it to be passive, right? You can just sit and listen to music while working, what have you. But that also means that we've never been as inundated towards our inner voice with content, which is what that speaks to, right? The artist creates this artifact, and that can't be separated from the platform, right? Spotify, like, so it's kind of like, I know when I've been like, let's say, I know I'm trying to get into a certain attitude